Hurricane Fiona struck Puerto Rico's southwest coast on Sunday as it unleashed landslides and knocked out the entire island's power grid, leaving thousands without power. Hundreds of people were evacuated or rescued across the island as floodwaters rose swiftly. Rushing rivers of brown water enveloped cars, first floors, and even an airport runway in the island's southern region. Coastal southwest Florida is decimated. Ferocious Hurricane Ian shredding parts of the peninsula as a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds almost hitting Cat 5 status. Ian is making history as one of the most powerful to ever hit the Sunshine State. More than 2 million losing power, and many in the area finding they've lost everything.
As soon as the storm had passed Fort Myers Beach, and actually as the final winds are still in the area, air crews immediately launched because search and rescue had already begun. Matter of fact, some calls had begun the night prior to the storm's arrival as it approached.
In 60-knot gusts in the pitch black, because there was no electricity, flying across the state to who knows what was quite something. And then all of a sudden we started seeing explosions, which was crazy, and it ended up being just transformers blowing up all around us. So immediately you're thrust into this quite an eerie situation, and just not knowing what to expect or what conditions you're going to find people or the city or the boats, that were affected by the storm.
We picked up the first man, we went straight to the second man. We dropped them at the hospital. While we were at the hospital, we found out about the next 3 people. That's the surprising thing to me in hindsight, is thinking, it was really such a long period of time, but it felt very brief.
Persons on board off of Fort Myers, we need help.
The involvement from Sector St. Pete and Air Station Clearwater was like a well-oiled machine.
What is your GPS position over?
The rest of the crews, basically, they were up at 4 o'clock, the helos were ready, and they were turning up before the sun came up. They showed up on scene, and you had 5 crews of people just executing rescue after rescue after rescue.
We picked up lots of people off of one island. They thought there was a bridge, and they thought that the fire department was coming and they were clearing the roads, and we had to, lower Jethro down and our other swimmer, Scotty, and he had to tell them, no one's coming, there's no road.
Lives saved and assisted ends up being more than 700 lives, and Air Station Clearwater alone ends up doing more than 100 rescues. Post-storm, first thing we do is do a waterways assessment, make sure that there's no obvious damage or obstacles within the channels. Our aids to navigation is functioning, the buoys, the day boards that we need to navigate safely. The ports are the lifeblood of the economy and provides necessary goods that we're going to need immediately after a storm to both rebuild and to keep the infrastructure moving.
We ended up having initially over 200 ATON discrepancies, primarily in the Port Charlotte on down to Fort Myers Beach area. It ended up being over 250 when it was all said and done. Many of those aids were completely destroyed, entire piles destroyed, missing, so we had to set temporary buoys, put temporary lights to mark the hazards.
And then those phases of all of our marine environmental protection mission, that work went on for 12 weeks.
We identified 7,500 boats that were in terrible condition that needed to be addressed by the Coast Guard. We ended up removing fuel from 3,500 vessels. Some of the boats had easy access and were able to use pumps to remove the fuel, and those that were underwater, we used divers to lift the boats to remove the fuel off.
And then reconstituting our own units. Station Fort Myers Beach, as I mentioned, was completely destroyed. That work is still ongoing.
Yeah, I live right over in Iona, about 4 miles from here, and I had over shoulder-high flooding throughout my entire house. Yeah, I lost a lot.
Our Coast Guard families are really an amazing thing. While our members needed to get back to work, our Coast Guard families picked up. Those that were devastated by Hurricane Ian found ways to get their lives back together. That required a lot of help in many cases, and our Coast Guard family came together like they always do. That family means our active duty members, our reservists, our auxiliaries, our Coast Guard Foundation members, that helped those families to rebuild so that their members can continue to focus on the mission.
So I think that's what struck me the most. I was happy to be able to help people who, were in an emergency or who were trapped, but it was also, really heartbreaking to look and realize that even though people are going to make it through today, their lives are completely changed.